From the Weather NorCal Command Center, this is your afternoon update.
Dennis's Heating and Air Conditioning is Northern California's premier heating and air conditioning contractor. From residential housing, large commercial projects, installation to repair, sheet metal fabrication, and everything in between, we are your go-to heating and air conditioning specialist.
Well, it's kind of hard to believe, especially if you're starting to experience some of that heat out there, that the warming trend is slow to start. But it is, especially when we take a look at the heat that will be here by the time we get into the weekend. Now, the big heat will arrive this weekend with temperatures possibly even tying or breaking some records. It's going to be close, I think, in many cases. But again, it's going to be slow to get here. You take a look at the highs for today. I think most of us in the valley will dodge 100 degrees, but it'll get close. I think Redding, Red Bluff may quite possibly touch 100 degrees today, but we'll call upper 90s. Chico about 95 degrees, and of course for the mountains, in the 80s, some 90s in there as well. There you can see by about 4 p.m., kind of the peak heat of the day here for the mountains should be in the upper 80s for Mount Shasta, Etna, and Alturas. And for places like Susanville, maybe around 90, 89 degrees for Bernie, and Paradise a high of about 90 degrees. So the heat coming in from the desert southwest, that's going to be migrating in our direction, but it's going to be slow to get here. Here's a look at this Thursday. You see how the main bubble of heat is actually over Southern California. In fact, many parts of Southern California are under an excessive heat warning through next Monday. So this is a prolonged heat wave for Southern California, and it's only going to make its presence known for us here in Northern California throughout the weekend, and then start to kind of move back down to the south by the time we go into next week. That's the weekend, right? And then we go into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of next week. You see how it just continues to migrate back down over the desert southwest. Now, here's what's interesting about that. It's something that hasn't really been mentioned a whole lot because really the main focus has been this heat. But another thing that I'm tracking is a potential for some monsoon moisture to come in here. Yeah, you've heard that phrase before, right? Typically this time of the year, you have the monsoon moisture of the desert southwest, thanks to this kind of area of high pressure right here. Now, that high pressure is also the reason why it's getting so hot around here. But when that high pressure is positioned just right, you get the flow around that high, the clockwise flow around that high that can bring in and transport some of that monsoon moisture into Northern California. And as it stands right now, it looks like as we go into early next week, we could be looking at some of that monsoon moisture coming in. And that's the reason why we're seeing those clouds here. But it could also, with that monsoon moisture, make it feel more humid around here. It's also the potential to bring some thunderstorms, especially in the mountains, as we go into Monday and maybe even to Tuesday of next week. But as mentioned, as that high pressure shifts back down to the south and east, I think we're going to lose that flow of that monsoon moisture eventually. But that's something worth monitoring and checking out, especially as we go into early next week. That could bring that potential for some more thunderstorms. So here's what it looks like today. Not quite 100 degrees for most of us in the valley, but it'll be close. Redding about 99, as well as Red Bluff, 95 in Chico. And for the mountains, upper 80s, low 90s for some of those daytime highs. You can see about 83 for Aden, 87 for Alturas. Susanville about 91, and for Mount Shasta City about 88 degrees. We take a look at your 7-day forecast, and you can see temperatures actually dropping, believe it or not, a degree or two from today to tomorrow. And that's the case for everyone. But it's not until really Friday that you'll notice here that significant increase and an even bigger increase going into the weekend. Now, we look at the valley, and we're already up to about 100 degrees here by Thursday, and maybe even as early as today for Redding and Red Bluff, but kind of splitting hairs. So we'll kind of just call it mid to upper 90s for Chico through Thursday. For Redding and Red Bluff, probably somewhere around the upper 90s to maybe around 100 degrees. But then by Friday, that's the more significant increase. That's the more noticeable increase. And then over the weekend, that's the peak of this heat wave we've been talking about before we do start to see those temperatures drop by early next week.